experience, your relevant experience in being the best person to deliver on those things?
Well, look, I've made my career fighting injustice, exposing war crimes and corruption. I run a business that's exposed terrorism, that's exposed sexual slavery by ISIS, that's exposed judicial corruption. And right now we have a crisis of corruption in American politics. And since we're live on Fox, let me take this opportunity to address directly the Fox audience. We have 2 United States senators in Georgia who have blatantly used their offices to enrich themselves. This is beyond partisanship. And the reason to your question that I talk so much about health and jobs and justice for all the people is that we can unite behind that program. We've lost 9 rural hospitals in Georgia in 10 years. We can reopen them. We can invest in infrastructure to build jobs, revitalize our communities, create opportunity, raise the minimum wage so that people doing an honest week's work can not just survive, but can thrive. And yes, pass landmark civil rights and voting rights legislation to secure equal justice for all. And I humbly and respectfully request the support of everyone who is tuned in on Fox right now. And I'd love for you to log on to electjon, electjon.com. That's electjon.com. Make a contribution to our efforts here in Georgia.
And one more quick one while we've got you. Any concern that the allegations of wrongdoing against Reverend Warnock could possibly be a drag on the Democratic ticket next week?
None whatsoever. Reverend Warnock addressed this issue a year ago. And here's the bottom line. Kelly Loeffler has been campaigning with a Klansman. Kelly Loeffler has been campaigning with a Klansman. And so she is stooping to these vicious personal attacks to distract from the fact that she's been campaigning with a former member of the Ku Klux Klan. I mean, we deserve better than that here in Georgia. And I want to encourage everybody to make a plan to vote on Tuesday.
The thing about going for a gotcha question against Jon Ossoff is that he's running against a Republican. And in today's Republican Party, chances are your hands aren't exactly clean. Here we have Fox reporter Peter Doocy trying to embarrass Jon Ossoff regarding his fellow Democrat running for Senate, Raphael Warnock. Republicans have been trying to concoct a scandal out of Warnock being arrested for obstructing an investigation into child abuse in an organization he was involved with roughly 20 years ago, a claim that was debunked by PolitiFact. Warnock had been arrested only to have the charges dropped. The prosecutor who requested the charges get dropped admitted Warnock was, quote, very helpful with the investigation and dismissed the arrest as a miscommunication. Warnock himself explained that he was, quote, working at trying to make sure that young people who were being questioned by law enforcement had the benefit of counsel, a lawyer, or a parent. The law enforcement officers actually later thanked me for my cooperation and for helping them. But the attacks on Warnock should come as no surprise. In fact, Republicans have been especially focused on Raphael Warnock during this entire campaign, far more than Jon Ossoff. They've released ads calling him a radical liberal, a Marxist, a communist. Meanwhile, the guy is a pastor. He leads a church. He is quite literally what Republicans claim to support. And yet they've even attacked him for his religious beliefs. The same party that wails about religious persecution is doing exactly that to Warnock. I wonder what it is about Raphael Warnock that's led so many Republicans to focus their attacks on him in particular. In reality, if any candidate is morally compromised, it's probably the woman who most recently posed with Chester Doles, a known neo-Nazi and KKK member who marched in Charlottesville in 2017, presumably one of the very fine people that Donald Trump was referring to. Loeffler's campaign spokesman said, quote, Kelly had no idea who that was, and if she had, she would have kicked him out immediately because we condemn in the most vociferous terms everything that he stands for. Funny how the only people who Republicans never seem to know about when they constantly pose with them in photos are famous white supremacists. And then there's the issue of Loeffler and Perdue exploiting their positions to get rich off the pandemic. Both Loeffler and Perdue made millions in stock trades at the beginning of the pandemic after a senator's-only coronavirus briefing, making 2 of the country's richest elected officials even richer. And to make matters worse, both Loeffler and Perdue had initially opposed $2,000 checks to the American people, with Loeffler calling them, quote, counterproductive, and David Perdue saying this.
I think incenting people right now through payroll tax is one way to do it. And I do support that, actually. I support that better than giving just a direct payment like we did in the first round of CARES. I really oppose that because we didn't see the impact back in 11 and 12 when that was done.
And yet now, both Loeffler and Perdue suddenly came out to say that, in fact, they do support $2,000 checks. only to have Mitch McConnell block the bill from even going to the floor for a vote. In other words, it was only after they were assured by McConnell that they wouldn't ever have to actually cast any vote that they could use their so-called support to virtue signal on the campaign trail. Millions and millions of Americans are hurting. They're trying to put food on the table and pay their rent and keep the heat on in the dead of winter. And all Kelly Loeffler and David Perdue are concerned with is giving themselves talking points so they could pander to people in the upcoming election. Yet again, the GOP's entire political philosophy is to manipulate their own supporters with duplicitous tactics. The fact is that if Loeffler and Perdue actually wanted to get adequate relief to their constituents, they'd have pushed for it before they knew that McConnell would simply block the bill. Republicans have a 2-seat majority in the Senate. Loeffler and Perdue had more than enough leverage if they were really interested in delivering $2,000 checks. And yet they stayed silent only until the moment they knew their support would only be symbolic. Because while to you, those $2,000 checks might mean survival, to them, they're a political prop. And look, we could go on all day about how the Republican senators from Georgia are the worst kind of corrupt, self-serving politicians. But the point is this. So much of what's important to us hinges on electing Jon Ossoff and Raphael Warnock to the United States Senate. Getting a Democratic majority means $2,000 checks. It means a $15 minimum wage. It means federally decriminalized marijuana. It means codifying protections for women's reproductive rights. It means a badly needed Voting Rights Act. It means bold action against climate change. But what we'll get if the Senate remains in Republican hands is more of exactly what we have right now, which is to say record obstructionism and deference to the ultra-wealthy and corporations. It'll mean zero relief for Americans who so desperately need it in the face of a pandemic that Republicans themselves allowed to explode throughout this country. And by the way, Republicans are well aware that they don't actually stand for anything. Here's David Perdue descending into full panic when asked about his service to his own constituents.
There's a service component to the job. What about your service as a United States Senator? Should voters who are trying to make up their minds in Georgia, what part of your service would you like to highlight for them?
Well, that's a tough question, Trey. You know,
You would think he was asked to define the Pythagorean theorem. Simply put, the difference between the two parties couldn't be more obvious, and the impact that Democratic control of the Senate will have on real people cannot be overstated. We need an agenda for the actual people of this country, an agenda that has widespread support, an agenda that actually helps us in our day-to-day lives, that protects our health, our wallets, and our planet. And it's not a pipe dream. It's one election away, only days away from now. If the people of Georgia can turn out in the same numbers they turned out for Joe Biden, then we will win. We can protect our healthcare, our climate, our wages, reproductive rights, civil rights, and have the wherewithal to care for our families. It is just a matter of voting for it. If you like this video, please check out my podcast, No Lie with Brian Tyler Cohen, where I take a deep dive into the week's most important stories and interview major players in politics, including Kamala Harris, Katie Porter, Adam Schiff, Nancy Pelosi, Eric Swalwell, Mary Trump, Al Franken, Cory Booker, and many, many more. Again, that's No Lie with Brian Tyler Cohen, available anywhere you listen to podcasts.